Amanda, hello.
Hi, Juliet.
I'm here today talking to Amanda Robinson, who is no relation, bizarrely enough, but fantastic surname. I have done some work with Amanda and her teams, and I just think she's got so much leadership experience and some fantastic leadership skills, and I think some unusual experience in things like being a co-CEO, which is still an unusual position, I think, and we'll talk a bit about that. But also you work in a fairly male-dominated arena as well, Amanda. So welcome. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation. The first thing I wanted to ask is, how did you get here? What are the steps you took in your career to get to the point where you're the co-CEO of a large-ish company, you know, with geographic spread?
I'd say small to medium enterprise, but
okay, all right.
not that big. It's interesting because I've been reflecting on this recently, and I think I've always been open to change and learning new things. So if I look back on my career, I started in Adelaide as a graduate, mechanical engineering graduate, fell in love with acoustics, and I've been in acoustics ever since. But after 5 years in that role, I had an opportunity to do an exchange to London, which, took me to brand new challenges and things. Then I met my husband over there. He had a midlife crisis. We took some time out, went sailing, came back to Australia. And then I think, again, I've just opened myself up to learning everything that I possibly can. So I looked for opportunities to, I guess, understand the bigger picture about the company. And, I sat in as an observer on board meetings because I could see that there was a need for support. And I guess I thought, maybe there's an opportunity for me to help out there. And that led to a director's role. And then that led to the CEO role, the co-CEO role. So it's been a really, exciting journey. But I guess I'm just open to change and open to new things. And I think
lots of curiosity. It's interesting, isn't it? Because we're not all comfortable with change. And you've sought out change every step of the way, haven't you?
If I look at my progression, every 5 years, it seems to be that there needs to be a new challenge, or I'm not engaged.
Do you find, because I know when I have done things where I've sought out the change, I still have moments where I think, oh my God, what am I doing? Have you had those moments along the way?
Oh yes, many moments. In fact,
right. Yes. Tell me, what do you enjoy about leadership?
I think I enjoy helping people. I enjoy making those connections, and again, it's one of the things where I'm at now. I feel like I'm able to provide real value to people, and see opportunities, help people link up, try and mentor people. So I guess that's what I enjoy the most about it. Having difficult conversations, it's not easy, but I think once you've done it, you actually feel better about it. It's no longer that little niggle going, oh, I've got to deal with that. I know I've got to deal with it. I used to have, I used to take the approach that I'll just push that to the bottom of the list. And then a very good friend of mine said, I do difficult things first thing in the day because that means that I don't have it hanging over me. And that was such good advice. And so I now have taken that on board, and I try and do those difficult things, at the start of the day.
I think we feel bravest when we have the energy, don't we? By the end of the day, you're a bit worn down often.
Yeah, or you just don't get to it, and then it's, and then you've got to sleep on it again, and it's, it starts to then become a real issue.
What are the things you find most challenging? What are the difficult things that you tackle at the start of the day?
No, mostly it's personnel.
Yeah.
I think the HR component of the role is probably the most difficult.
It's so often the case, isn't it? I think we all, particularly when like you're used to being technically really competent, and then you take on leading people, and they're just completely different, aren't they? It's a completely different skill set, and they're complicated, and they're annoyingly difficult sometimes.
Yeah, and you can't predict where they're going to go. Like, at least with calculations, you know where it's going to go, and there's a set of physical rules that you can apply. That's not the case with people. It's interesting. I've been reading a book called No Ceiling, No Walls, which talks about the layering and how you, when you get into a leadership role, you add skills to your skill set. So you've got your individual contribution, your technical side of things, but then you start to layer up. And as part of that, you've got to drop some of the technical skills along the way so that you can continue to grow in the leadership role.
That's really interesting. That is such a challenge, I think, for some leaders. And I think the more technically competent you are, the harder that can be, because often that's how we define ourselves, isn't it? By our technical competence. And when you take on leadership, I totally agree. I think something's got to give, and it has to be that doing the doing, because otherwise you don't have enough capacity to lead the doing, do you?
But if you love doing the doing, then that makes it really hard. And then you've got to evaluate, is that the right role? Have I ended up, going down the path that I wanted to, or do I need to pivot?
Yeah, no, that is really hard. Do you think when you're in these leadership roles, do you see people who are naturally good people leaders coming up behind you? Do you think you can spot them?
There are certainly people in the organisation who are ready to step up. So yeah, I think we're not great at nurturing them. And there's one person in the office who's actually taken on board doing some women in leadership skills. She is amazing. She has grown so much, and it has made such a difference to her outlook. So I think with that nurturing, you take the natural talent that's there and you just put it on steroids. Yeah. And it's wonderful to see people grow in that way too, isn't it? Yeah. And it's incredibly motivating for them too. Yeah. Absolutely. Can I ask you, you've worked in different countries, so you've worked in the UK and in different organisations, and you're about to move to Canada to work. Do you see differences in leadership across different cultures? I don't know about different cultures, certainly different companies. So I think Marshall Day and the culture there is completely different to the culture at the company that I was at previously, which was a very large multidisciplinary. Like there's something like 20,000 employees now, and you're just a number. So that culture was completely different to where I'm at now. I'm so excited about going to North America and finding out how they operate. And from what I've heard from everybody there, it's a different culture again. They're much friendlier. So it'll be really interesting to to see how they approach things in a different way. But I wouldn't say it's necessarily a country-based attribute. I'd probably attribute it to the company as opposed to the country. Yeah, that's really interesting. So whilst you've been at Marshall Day, do you feel like you have influenced the culture? Oh, I'd like to think so. I've been there 17 years. Yeah. How long have you been co-CEO? So that's for 5 years. Yeah. So what sort of changes do you think you've made to the culture, particularly in those 5 years? Sorry, that's a tricky question, isn't it? I would like to think that, and we've done quite a bit of work on this recently, about bringing more of a business focus rather than just a family focus. A family first. Marshall Day is a very personable culture, which we're described as having a clan-based culture. So we look out for one another, but that doesn't necessarily make for a successful business if you don't have the business acumen to go with it. So I think we've certainly worked, both my co-CEO and myself to bring more of that business acumen to it.
Yeah, yeah. It's a really challenging thing, isn't it? Because you don't want to mess with that sort of culture. You don't want to mess with the closeness of people and the sort of collegiality of a clan, but you do need to bring that focus or change that focus slightly, don't you?
Correct. Yeah.
How do you think being a CEO has changed the way you work, or has changed you potentially? Do you feel like you have grown into the role over the last 5 years?
I certainly do. It's been a massive shift from just technical engineering work to actually running a company. And I wouldn't have it any other way. So I've learned so much about, the sort of skill sets you need and the sort of issues that arise and how you communicate with the board and, how to get where you're going, you've got to have a plan and you've got to know, the right people to work with and push and how to get your way. So I find that fascinating.
Yeah.
And having somebody to share the role with as well was nice, to have somebody to bounce ideas off or, bring things to the table and say, what about this? What about that? This is my thinking. Is that the right path? So that's been really good as well.
Yeah, because the co-CEO is still, as I mentioned, it's still quite a rare proposition. And in fact, I read an article the other day saying it's a really bad idea to have co-CEOs because there's not a single point of accountability. And yet you seem to have made it work really well. And you've been doing it for a number of years. What do you think the secret has been there?
The secret has definitely been good communication. You have to have good communication between the two parties.
Yeah.
And you've got to be, I'm fortunate that we've never had a difference of opinion, a strong difference of opinion on any issue. So we're aligned in our values, we're aligned in our strategic thinking, which is really helpful. I think if they're, from the get-go, had there been that conflict, it wouldn't have worked as well. A little bit of conflict is not a bad thing, but to have utter conflict between two people, it just would fall over.
Interesting, those shared values. You were both in the company when you became co-CEOs, weren't you?
Yes. Yep.
Yes. So there was a shared understanding of the history as well.
Yeah, we were both long-standing employees, and had been. I think my co-CEO, it's his only company that he's worked at, so he was there as a graduate, and came up through the ranks.
Right. Yes. So it's very much a part of the culture.
But I think as well, the male-female attributes complement one another in that role. I still think that in a board position or in a leadership position, it is so important to have that different point of view, the different thinking, the different way of working, because women do work differently to men. Like I've found that the way that I work is completely different to a lot of the males in the organisation, and I think that's a really positive thing.
Did they think it was a positive thing when you became the CEO? Was there any pushback? Was there a struggle there from that perspective?
No, I think I originally declined the CEO role. I said, no, I don't want to do that. And they said, come on. I'm like, oh. And I said I'd do it for 2 years. I've now done it for 5. I think there is a limited life on a CEO's role. It is, and particularly we've had to deal with COVID as well. Like, it's not been business as usual under any stretch of the imagination. And it does take its toll. So, I think I'm certainly looking forward to a new chapter where I don't have those pressures. But equally, I'm already starting to look at angles of how I can, bring the leadership skills into the organisation without having that responsibility.
That was going to be one of my questions, was that you're not taking on a CEO role. In your next role in Canada, you're going to be more of a project manager. Is that right? So you're going to be doing more hands-on work again.
Yes, I'll be back to on the tools.
Yeah.
So taking on a vice president of architecture role and running a team, but a much smaller team within the organisation, and really, seeing how I can bring the best out of them to bring the best to the company, and give me some focus for, and time for other things as well.
For life.
Yeah. Nice family.
Yes. It'll be interesting because I think, given that you have been in charge for 5 years, it's an interesting dynamic to then step back and just be in charge of your team, in a sense, isn't it?
I don't know how it's going to go. I have a feeling that I have a tendency to just, if I see something that I think I can help out with or fix, I go for it. So, I can see I'm going to have to hold back a bit already. Yeah.
Yes. And I might check back in with you in a year or two and see where you've got to, because you're probably leading the company.
Oh no, I don't want to do that again. But I may well be, on a board of another company, helping somebody out. So
yeah, okay. Just going back to the co-CEO role, would you recommend it to people?
I think it can work if you have the right communication structure in place. I think as soon as you start to, if that communication breaks down for whatever reason, then it doesn't work, and one person is just left to, try and muddle through, or, things get held up because you're waiting on a decision and it doesn't come. That's how you either take the decision or things just start to fall by the wayside.
Did you find in your role that you sort of divided to conquer? So you would take on different aspects of the leadership as co-CEOs?
Yeah, we nominally split it into, so I looked after sort of human resources, and my co-CEO looked after the financial side of things. And so that was the nominal split, but then there's a whole lot of things that don't fall in either of those baskets.
Exactly, there's a lot of crossover.
Yeah.
Definitely. Tell me, I mean, you're moving to Canada and we're in the middle of what they're calling the Great Resignation or the Great Reorganisation. Is that impacting the engineering world? Are you seeing that fluidity of people moving around?
Massively across. It is not just engineering, it is architecture, it is construction, it is, pretty much every sector of the building fraternity is impacted by it. And I've certainly noticed that it's probably more female based than male. Not and maybe that's because of the networks that I'm connected to, that I'm paying attention as to who's going where. But there is certainly, and I think COVID has had a lot to do with it, made people reassess what is really important to them, and they're going back to their core values and saying, that's what I want. Yeah,
and I'm not prepared to put up with the sort of compromises I've been making, because it's all, there's more of a focus on life at the moment, isn't there, on actually the quality of life rather than the quality of work, I think, first.
Absolutely. Yep.
Do you have any advice for keeping good people, attracting the people you want, trying to reduce the churn of the people that you want to keep?
I think where our industry is headed, and I've noticed that some of the bigger firms are starting to talk to their clients about this, but it's, previously it used to be just throw whatever resources you need at it, we'll pay you extra, it's not an issue, or just throw resources at it, you need to do it by this date. And employers are actually pushing back on clients and saying, no, I cannot work my staff any harder than they already are, and there's got to be a quality of life and also recognition of some of the mental health issues that are starting to play out, maybe as a result of COVID, or maybe we just didn't pay attention to them before, and now they're blatant. So I think that is going to start to play out in the industry, and we're not going to see, you know, ridiculous timeframes put on things.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because what you're talking about is leaders stepping up and protecting their teams.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, you're right. In the past, it's been such a customer focus. It's a yes, we'll get it done at whatever cost. You just tell us what you want. And what you're describing is almost a 180 flip on that, saying we absolutely want to help you, but we need to look after our people.
We can help you, but we can't do it in such a ridiculous time frame. Here's our time frame to do it. You know,
and it takes skills to have those conversations too, doesn't it? You know, that's a skill set. Those holding of the boundaries can be difficult for people. So that's definitely a leadership skill for people coming through, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you. If there was one piece of advice you'd give people stepping up into a CEO role, what would it be?
Listen. Be available to your staff and listen. Like sometimes it's hard to, you know, not jump straight to the end point and go, I think I know where you're going with this. Just, you know, sometimes people just want to talk or vent or whatever and get it out their system. And, you know, you can work with them to resolve whatever problems are arising. But I think, you know, one of the things that I often come back to is, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And it's not always, you know, some people can struggle to articulate that, but by you listening to them, you can, you know, perhaps see that there is an avenue that you can change things that will make their life easier.
Yeah. And yes, I always say it's one of those things we all think we're good at, but so often we're not. So that conscious listening is really interesting. Yeah, actually trying to do it. Thank you so much, Amanda. It's been fantastic to talk with you. Good luck in Canada. We will keep in touch.
Thank you.